They laughed at her tears. But the mafia boss promised they'd never laugh again. The air in Cielo Rosso was thick, layered with the smells of expensive whiskey, old leather, and the kind of perfume that cost more than a month's rent. For Sienna Hart. All 25 years of her existence had felt like preparation for this job, to be invisible, to anticipate needs before they were spoken, and to apologize for the space she occupied. Cielo Rosso was the polished jewel of Kings Bay, a city that had long ago traded its soul for a skyline. It sat on the 32nd floor, a panorama of glittering lights that made the corruption below look beautiful. It was a place for businessmen who blurred the line between corporate and criminal, and for gangsters who wore tailored suits and spoke with quiet, chilling authority. Sienna was quiet, too, but not with authority. Hers was the quiet of a mouse navigating a room full of sleeping cats. Hart, table 7 is empty. It shouldn't be. Get over there! Derek, the manager, hissed as he glided past. He never looked at her, his eyes always scanning for bigger tips, for the flash of a platinum card. Yes, Derek. Sorry. Derek. Sienna balanced the heavy silver tray against her hip and moved. Her uniform was a simple black dress, modest and functional, but on her, it always felt like a costume for someone who didn't belong. She belonged in the shadows, not under the warm, amber spotlights of the main floor. The laughter from table 9 cut through the low thrum of conversation. It was a sharp, barking sound, full of arrogance. Chase Devereaux, son of a senator and owner of the city's most punchable smirk, was holding court. He and his friends were regulars, young men who had never been told no, and they treated the staff like furniture that occasionally brought them drinks. Sienna approached with a fresh bottle of champagne, the one Derek had insisted they push. Mr. Devereaux, your champagne. About time, one of his friends mumbled, as Sienna leaned in to pour. A hand, not Chase's, but one of his entourage, jostled her arm. It was intentional, a casual shove meant to unbalance her. It worked. The tray tilted. Sienna gasped, trying to right it, but the laws of physics were cruel. The heavy bottle and 2 flutes slid, crashing onto the table. Champagne, cold and bubbling, erupted over the polished wood, splashing onto the front of Chase Devereaux's linen jacket. The entire club went silent. Sienna froze, her blood turning to ice. I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry. It was an accident. Chase looked down at the dark, spreading stain on his jacket. He didn't move. He just stared. Then slowly, he lifted his eyes to hers. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. An accident, he drawled. This jacket is worth more than your life, sweetheart. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her hands trembling as she fumbled with a napkin. Oh, look, Chase said, pitching his voice for the tables around them. She's shaking. Are you going to cry? Is the little waitress going to cry? And to her absolute, soul-crushing humiliation, she did. A hot tear escaped, tracing a path of shame down her cheek. She scrubbed at it, which only made it worse. That's when the red light appeared. Chase's friend, the one who had shoved her, was holding his phone up, recording. This is priceless. The friend laughed. Chase leaned into the frame, preening for the camera. Kings Bay's finest service. They cry all over you. He gestured to the spill. And they're wet, too. The table erupted in laughter. Sienna, trapped between their mockery and the staring eyes of the entire lounge, grabbed the empty tray and fled to the kitchens, the sound of their howling laughter following her all the way. From a dark corner booth, elevated slightly above the main floor, Luciano Moretti watched the entire exchange without moving a muscle. He sat alone, a glass of untouched water in front of him. His suit was dark, bespoke, and seamless, at mid-30s. He commanded a stillness that was more terrifying than any overt threat. His eyes, dark and analytical, tracked Sienna's retreat. He noted the phone, the smirk on the senator's son, and the precise moment the girl's composure broke. He registered it all, filed it, and took a slow, deliberate sip of his water. The rest of the night was a blur of whispered insults. The video, captioned Cielo Rosso waitress has a meltdown, was already making the rounds among the staff before she'd even finished cleaning the mess in the kitchen. Her shiftmates, the same ones who borrowed her tips for cab fare, now looked at her with pity and thinly veiled contempt. "I saw it," a hostess whispered by the service bar. "It's already got like 10,000 views. It's all over the local feeds." "God, so embarrassing." Derek cornered her by the lockers. His face was pinched and pale. "You made a scene. Heart, a scene. Our clientele pays for exclusivity, not for your pathetic drama. You're on probation. One more mistake, and you're gone. Now go scrub the grout in the men's room." "Yes, Derek." She finished hours later, long after the last patron had left. The club was quiet, the chairs stacked, the glorious view of Kings Bay just a dark mirror reflecting her own exhausted face. She was wiping down the mahogany bar, the smell of lemon oil and stale alcohol filling her nose, when a voice from the darkness made her jump. "You missed a spot." Sienna spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. The man from the corner booth was still there, standing by the entrance. He hadn't been there a second ago. He moved like a shadow. "I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, her hand flying to her chest. "We're closed." "I can see that." He walked toward her, his steps silent on the plush carpet. He was tall, with a lean, powerful build that his suit couldn't hide. He stopped on the other side of the bar, close enough that she could see the sharp cut of his jaw and the unnerving calm in his dark eyes. He looked at her, really looked, and it felt different from Chase's leering, different from Derek's dismissal. It felt like being weighed. I'll get the manager," she said, taking a step back. "He's gone." Luke glanced at the bar top she'd just wiped. "You work hard." It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. "I try, sir." He reached into his jacket, and she flinched. He paused, his hand halfway. He slowly withdrew a money clip, pulling off a thick fold of bills. He laid them on the bar. Sienna looked down. It was 5 $100 bills. Her eyes widened. It was more than her rent. "Sir, I can't. This is too much." "It's not," he said, his voice a low rumble. He pushed the money an inch closer. "They shouldn't have laughed." She looked up, confused. His expression was flat, unreadable, but his eyes held an intensity that rooted her to the spot. "They won't again." He turned and walked out, disappearing into the service elevator without another sound. Sienna stared at the $500, his words echoing in the empty lounge. She brushed it off. Rich men said cryptic things all the time, drunk on power and whiskey. He was probably just trying to get her attention. She pocketed the cash, her fingers trembling, and tried to forget his chilling gaze. The next day, she walked into chaos. Derek was by the hostess stand, his face sheet white, whispering furiously into his phone. 2 men in dark suits, not patrons. These men looked official, cold, were inspecting the liquor licenses by the bar. "What's going on?" Sienna asked Maria. Another waitress. Maria's eyes were wide. "You didn't hear? Chase Devereaux's social media is gone. Wiped, his Instagram, his Twitter. All of it. Vanished this morning." "What? And that's not all," Maria whispered, nodding toward the suits. "We're being audited. Something about a health code violation and an anonymous tip to the hospitality board. Derek looks like he's going to be sick." Sienna thought of the man at the bar. They won't again. A cold dread, mixed with something sharp and unfamiliar, settled in her stomach. It wasn't a boast. It was a promise. He returned that night. The club was tense and half empty. The under-review status had scared off the casual crowd, but not him. Luciano Moretti took his usual booth. Derek, seeing him, practically ran over, his face a mask of frantic obsequiousness. "Mr. Moretti, sir. Pleasure. Can I get you your usual?" Luke didn't look at him. His gaze scanned the room until it found Sienna, who was pretending to wipe down an already clean table. "Send me the girl from last night," Luke said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly. "Sienna." Sienna froze. Derek's head snapped toward her. A flicker of panic, then realization, crossed his face. "Of course, sir. Right away." He scurried over to her. "Hart, Mr. Moretti requested you. Personally, do not mess this up." Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her notepad. She approached the booth, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Good evening, sir." "Sienna." He said her name as if it belonged in his mouth. "A bottle of Macallan, the 18, and 2 glasses." "2, sir?" "I'm not drinking alone." She retrieved the bottle and the glasses, her movements stiff. She poured him a measure, her hand steady only through sheer force of will. He gestured to the empty seat opposite him. "Sit." It was not a request. She slid into the booth, perching on the edge of the leather cushion. He pushed the second glass toward her. "Sir, I can't drink on the clock." "You're not on the clock," he said, pouring a small amount of the amber liquid into her glass. "You are having a conversation with me. Derek will not be interrupting." She looked over. Derek was watching, wringing his hands, but he made no move to intervene. She looked back at Luke. He was watching her, his head tilted slightly. "You're from Kings Bay?" "No, sir, originally from upstate." "Family here?" A pang. She looked down at the glass. "No, sir, just me." His questions were gentle, almost polite, but they felt calculated. He asked about the neighborhood she lived in, how long she'd worked at Cielo Rosso, what she'd done before. He didn't ask about the video. He didn't ask about Chase, or the money, or the sudden audit. He just listened. Sienna found herself answering honestly, her voice small. She was nervous, terrified even, but there was something else. A strange, magnetic pull. He was the first person in months who had asked her a question and actually waited for the answer. He made her feel seen. When the conversation lulled, he finished his drink. He signaled for the check, which Derek practically teleported to the table. Luke dropped several large bills into the folder without looking. As he stood, Sienna stood too, a reflex. "Thank you for the drink, sir." He paused, looking down at her. "Luciano, or Luke." He reached out, and for a heart-stopping second, she thought he was going to touch her. Instead, he picked up a clean cocktail napkin from the table, took a pen from his jacket, and wrote 4 words. He slid it across the table to her, along with another folded $100 bill. Then he was gone. Sienna looked at the bill, then unfolded the napkin. The handwriting was strong, clean, and black. "If you want out, say the word." She stared at it, her heart thumping a heavy, uneven rhythm. Out. Out of her job? Out of the city? Out of what? She tucked the napkin into her apron pocket, the cotton scratching against the crisp edge of the $100 bill. She left at 2 a.m. The alley behind the club offering the fastest shortcut to the all-night bus stop. The air was damp and smelled of garbage and rain. She clutched her purse, her footsteps echoing off the wet brick. Well, well, look who it is." Sienna's blood ran cold. She stopped. Chase Devereaux stepped out from behind a rusted dumpster, blocking her path. He wasn't alone. 2 of his friends, the same ones from the club, fanned out behind him. They were drunk, their laughter wet and ugly. "It's the little crying waitress," Chase slurred, taking a step toward her. Sienna backed up, hitting the solid brick wall. "Leave me alone, Chase." "Leave me alone, Chase," he mimicked in a high, mocking voice. "You got some nerve. You and your mysterious friend got my accounts shut down, you little bitch." "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, her eyes darting for an escape. There was none. "Liar." He lunged, grabbing her wrist in a painful grip. He yanked her forward. "We're gonna make another video, a much better one. Show everyone what a little whore you really are." His friend pulled out his phone. The same red light flashing. They were laughing. They were actually laughing. Sienna braced herself, a scream building in her throat, a sound cut through the alley, not a voice. A scrape of expensive leather on pavement. One of Chase's friends turned. "Who the hell are you?" 2 shadows detached themselves from the deeper darkness by the street. They were large men, dressed in dark, functional suits. They moved with a speed that was terrifying. It wasn't a fight, it was a disposal. Before Chase's friend could even lower his phone, one of the shadows moved in. There was the sound of a heavy, precise impact, and the man crumpled. The second friend raised his fists, but the other shadow was already on him, blocking the sloppy punch, twisting the man's arm. A sharp crack echoed in the narrow space. followed by a choked scream. It was over in less than 10 seconds. Chase's friends were on the wet pavement, groaning, neutralized. Chase stared, his mouth open, his grip on Sienna's wrist forgotten. A third figure stepped out of the mouth of the alley, his suit immaculate, his hands in his pockets. Luciano Moretti didn't look at the men on the ground. He didn't look at Chase. His eyes were fixed only on Sienna, on the hand gripping her arm. He walked forward calmly, stopping just inches from them. He gently, almost tenderly, took Sienna's arm and detached Chase's fingers, pulling her behind him. Only then, with Sienna safely behind his shoulder, did Luke turn his calm, chilling gaze to the senator's son. Chase was trembling, the drunken arrogance evaporating into pure, stark terror. "She's under my protection now," Luke said. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact, a declaration that had just redrawn the borders of the world. Sienna leaned against the cold brick, her legs unable to hold her, watching the man who had just claimed her. The silence in the alley was louder than the screams had been. Chase Devereaux was pressed against the opposite wall, his face a mask of pale, drunken terror. His two friends were groaning on the wet pavement, one clutching a broken wrist, the other spitting blood. Luciano Moretti had not moved, had not flinched. He stood in front of Sienna, a shield of tailored wool and absolute stillness. "Take them," Luke said, his voice level. The two large men who had materialized from the shadows moved with practiced efficiency. They hauled Chase and his friends to their feet. "You can't touch me," Chase stammered, his voice cracking. My father is Senator Devereaux. He'll ruin you." Luke looked at him then, a look so devoid of emotion, so utterly cold that Chase's bluster died in his throat. Luke said nothing. He simply nodded to his men. They half-dragged, half-carried the three men out of the alley and into a black van that had slid silently to the curb. The doors shut, the engine engaged, and they were gone. The alley was empty again, save for the two of them. Sienna was shaking, her back pressed hard against the cold, damp brick. Her legs felt like water. Adrenaline was draining away, leaving a sick, hollow feeling. Luke turned to her. His focus was total. "Are you hurt?" She tried to speak, but only a dry rasp came out. She shook her head. He stepped closer, and she flinched. A tiny, involuntary movement. He stopped instantly, holding his hands up slightly, palms out. "I'm not going to hurt you. Sienna." He waited. He simply waited until her breathing started to even out, until the violent trembling in her knees subsided to a quiver. "I'm driving you home," he said. It wasn't a question. He placed a hand on her lower back. It wasn't a caress, not a violation. It was a firm, warm, guiding pressure, a silent command. "Walk," she obeyed. Moving on unsteady legs, his sleek black car was parked just past the alley's mouth, its engine idling so quietly she hadn't even heard it. He opened the passenger door for her. She slid inside. The interior was a fortress of black leather and polished wood, silent and safe. It smelled clean, like expensive soap and cold night air. It smelled like him. He got in the driver's seat and the car pulled away from the curb, a smooth, powerful glide. The sounds of the city were muted, as if they were moving through a different world. For several minutes, he just drove. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was a space for her to breathe. "Where do you live?" he asked finally, his eyes on the road. She gave him the address, a rundown street in the city's oldest, poorest district. He nodded, already turning in that direction. "How long have you lived there?" 2 years. "Is it safe?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "It's cheap." He was quiet for another block. "You cannot stay there tonight. Not after this." He glanced at her, his profile sharp in the passing streetlights. "Devereaux's son will be released. His father will see to it. They know where you work. They likely know where you live. I don't have anywhere else to go. I have places," he said. "Apartments, safe, clean. You would be protected." She looked down at her hands, twisting the strap of her cheap purse. This was how it happened. This was how girls like her disappeared. They got scared, they took a favor, and they were never seen again. Her mother's ghost whispered a warning in her ear. "No," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "Thank you, but I don't take things from people." He looked at her then, a long, assessing gaze. He seemed to be weighing her pride, measuring her fear. She expected him to argue, to insist, to threaten. He did none of those. He just nodded, a small, single dip of his chin. "As you wish." They pulled up in front of her building, a 5-story brick walk-up with a broken lobby light and graffiti on the door. He cut the engine, plunging the car into silence. He got out, walked around, and opened her door. She stepped out onto the cracked pavement, feeling small and exposed. "Thank you for the ride," she mumbled, clutching her purse to her chest. "Sienna." She stopped, turning back to him. "You will not be alone," he said. As if on cue, a black sedan, the same one from the alley, pulled up behind his car. The 2 men who had disposed of Chase got out. They were different now, their expressions neutral. They posted themselves on either side of her building's entrance. "I can't pay for this," she whispered, horrified. "You are not paying," he said. "This is not a transaction. Go inside. Lock your door." She stared at the men, then at him. He was impenetrable. She turned and fled into the building, her key shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the lobby door open. She didn't look back. She woke the next morning to the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. The gray morning light filtering through her thin curtains showed her the reality of her life. The peeling paint, the worn linoleum, the unpaid bills on her dresser. She had dreamt of the alley, of Chase's sneer and Luke's cold voice. She looked out her window. The black sedan was still there, parked across the street. 2 new men, same dark suits, stood on the pavement, a shift change. It had not been a dream. The phone buzzed again. It was Derek from the club. She answered, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. "Sienna," he said. His voice was slick with a false, corporate regret. "Listen, we've had to reevaluate our staffing needs, and frankly, after the incident, last night, we're going to have to let you go." "The incident?" she repeated, numb. "Derek, I was attacked. There are conflicting reports. Sienna. And honestly, we've been getting pressure. Senator Devereaux's office called this morning. My hands are tied. We'll mail you your final check." He hung up. The silence in the room was absolute. Fired. She had $700 to her name, most of it from Luke's cryptic tips. Rent was due in a week. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She scrolled through her contacts, her thumb hovering over the only family she had, Sarah. She pressed call. It rang once, twice, 4 times. It was going to voicemail. No. Someone picked up. "Hello?" Sienna's throat tightened. "Sarah, it's me. It's Sienna." A long, heavy silence stretched over the line. Sienna could hear a cartoon playing in the background, the cheerful sound of her nephew's show. "Sienna," her sister said finally, her voice flat. I told you, my husband, we can't be involved." "Involved in what?" Sienna cried, the desperation breaking through. "I'm not in trouble. I lost my job. I needed to know I wasn't alone. Mike doesn't want you calling. He says you attract drama. Now is not a good time. Sienna, I'm sorry." The line clicked. Sienna stared at the phone. Her sister, the only person on earth who shared her blood, had hung up on her. The abandonment was an old, familiar ache, a coldness that lived in her bones. She was 25 years old, and she was completely, utterly alone. The men in the car outside were not her protection. They were his. She sat on the edge of her bed for an hour, paralyzed by the quiet. Her phone rang again. An unknown number. She ignored it. It rang again. Immediate and persistent, she answered, her voice dead. "Hello?" "Sienna." His voice. "Luke." It was not a question. It was an anchor. How did you get my number?" she whispered. "That is not important," he said. "You are unemployed." It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. She felt a flush of shame. How did you know? It was inevitable. Senator Devereaux has a long reach when his pride is wounded. There was a pause. I'm having dinner tonight at my home. 8 o'clock. A car will be waiting for you. It was an order, delivered with the casual authority of a man who had never been disobeyed. Her pride bristled. I don't know, she said, trying to cling to the last shred of her independence. I don't think... You are out of options, he stated, not cruelly but logically. Your sister will not help you. You have no job, and you need to eat. His voice softened, just a fraction, losing its hard edge. Let me feed you, Sienna. He knew. He knew about her sister. He knew everything. The extent of his knowledge was terrifying, but the exhaustion, the hunger, and the crushing weight of her loneliness were worse. Okay, she said. At 7:45, the car was there. Not the sedan, but his personal car, the black, sleek machine she had been in last night. The driver, one of the men from the sedan, simply opened the door for her. The drive was long, leaving the grit of the city behind, climbing into the winding, wooded hills that overlooked Kings Bay. This was where the old money lived, high above the smog. They arrived at a set of towering iron gates. Villa Moretti. It wasn't a house. It was an estate, a sprawling stone mansion that looked like it had been lifted from the Italian countryside and dropped onto a mountain. It was beautiful, imposing, and utterly terrifying. The driver opened her door. Sienna stepped out, clutching the only decent purse she owned, feeling like a stray dog on the steps of a palace. Luke was waiting for her at the door. He wasn't in a suit. He wore simple black trousers and a dark gray, button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms dusted with dark hair. Without the armor of his suit, he seemed more real and infinitely more dangerous. Sienna, welcome. He led her inside. The foyer was vast, with a marble floor and a sweeping staircase, but he didn't lead her to a grand, empty ballroom. He guided her to a smaller, intimate dining room. A round table was set for two, flanked by a fireplace with a low, crackling fire. A wall of glass looked out over the glittering expanse of Kings Bay below. Please, he said, pulling out her chair. The dinner was quiet. The food was the best she had ever tasted, a rich risotto, seared scallops, wine that was smoother than silk. She hadn't realized how hungry she was. He didn't pry. He didn't ask about the alley or her job or her sister. He asked about the food. He asked if she had ever traveled. He refilled her wine glass. He simply watched her. He held space for her, and she found herself, slowly, beginning to fill it. You were right, she said, her voice quiet. They fired me. Senator Devereaux called the club. I know, Luke said, setting his fork down. And my sister... She looked down at her plate. She doesn't want to be involved with me. He just waited, his dark eyes patient. It spilled out of her then, not in a rush, but in slow, painful pieces. The years of trying to be invisible, the constant fear of being a burden. My mother, she said, the words tasting like ash. She died when I was 12, an overdose. I found her. She had never told anyone that, not a single soul. She looked up, expecting to see pity or disgust. Luke's expression was unchanged, but his gaze was intense. She was beautiful, Sienna whispered. But she was so weak. She always chose the wrong men who promised to protect her. They always hurt her in the end. She stopped, the implication of her words hanging in the air between them. She looked at him, a new, sharp suspicion in her eyes. Is that what this is? Are you one of them? Luke leaned forward slightly. His eyes held hers, and there was nothing in them but a cold, hard honesty. I am nothing like them. They make promises they cannot keep. I deliver, and I never, ever make a promise I cannot keep. He let that sink in. He wasn't offering pity. He wasn't offering apologies. He was just offering the truth. And for the first time in her life, Sienna felt seen. After dinner, he stood. The air is clear tonight. Walk with me. He led her through a set of French doors onto a vast stone terrace. Below them, a sprawling, formal rose garden descended in tiers, the scent of the blooms heavy in the cool night air. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering slightly. He stopped them at a low stone balustrade. The entire city was a carpet of diamonds at their feet. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's just lights," he replied. But he wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at her. "In foster care," as she said, her voice barely audible, "I learned to make myself small, invisible. If they don't see you, they can't hurt you. I wanted to be so small no one would ever notice me." He turned to her. The moonlight carved his face into sharp planes of light and shadow. He was closer than she expected. He lifted his hand, and she flinched, but she didn't pull away. He paused, his hand hovering before he gently, so gently, brushed his knuckles along the curve of her cheek. His skin was warm, slightly rough. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot through her, settling low in her stomach. "You don't have to be small to be safe," he said, his voice a low rumble. Her breath hitched. She was trembling, but not from the cold. He leaned in. It was slow, deliberate. He was giving her every chance to bolt. She was paralyzed, caught in the gravity of his gaze. His lips touched hers. It was not a kiss of passion. It was not hungry or demanding. It was a kiss of question, of assessment. It was slow and soft and achingly tender. It tasted of expensive wine and an authority she had never known. It felt, more than anything, like safety. Her body betrayed her. A full body tremble racked her frame. Her hands, of their own accord, came up and fisted the soft material of his shirt, not to pull him closer, but to hold herself upright. He felt the tremor. He broke the kiss, pulling back just an inch, resting his forehead against hers. His eyes were closed. His breathing was heavier than before. "Only if you want this," he whispered, his voice rough. She couldn't find her voice. She could only manage a tiny, jerky nod, her eyes wide and fixed on his. But he didn't kiss her again. He took a step back, putting a foot of cool night air between them. The chemistry was a tangible thing, humming in the space he had created, heavy and thick with unspoken things. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "My driver will take you home," he said, his voice all business once more. She was disoriented, her lips still tingling, her body aching with a strange, new tension. "Oh, okay." He walked her back to the car in silence. He didn't touch her. He just opened the door, and she got in. The ride down the mountain was a blur, her mind reeling. Meanwhile, in a smoky, private club in a different part of the city, Senator Devereaux was nursing a 30-year-old Scotch. His face was ruddy with rage. Across from him sat Rico Vellucci, the underboss of the Vellucci family, the Moretti Syndicate's oldest and most bitter rivals. "He humiliated my son," the senator snapped, "wiped him off the internet, had the audacity to have my club audited. That man needs to be taught a lesson." Rico Vellucci smiled, a gold tooth flashing in the dim light. "Luciano Moretti likes his control. What does this have to do with us, Senator?" "I want you to hit him," Devereaux said, his voice low. "Hit his businesses. Squeeze him. Let him know he can't touch a man like me. In return, I can make those zoning issues at the port disappear. That new import project you're so keen on?" Rico leaned forward, his eyes glittering. "He's interfering. We heard it was over some girl, a waitress." He chuckled. "This is a weakness, and we can always exploit a weakness." Later that night, Luke stood in his office, looking out at the same view of Kings Bay. His phone buzzed. It was his chief advisor. "Sir, the senator met with Rico Vellucci an hour ago at the Cypress Club." Luke did not turn around. As expected, they'll move on the warehouses first, try to disrupt the shipments. "Let them," Luke said. "They'll find them empty. Double the security on the girl. I want 2 men on her door, not just in the car. I want eyes on her, 24 hours a day. And our response to the Velluccis, sir." Luke turned from the window. His eyes were cold stone. "We wait. We let them overplay their hand, and we plan." The first week was a blur of polite rejections. The second was a series of doors slamming shut. Sienna Hart, armed with a neatly printed resume and her best thrift store blazer, learned quickly what it meant to be blackballed in Kings Bay. She would walk into an interview, and it would start well. The manager of a downtown bistro, a small art gallery, even a corporate catering company, they all liked her quiet demeanor, her clear, articulate answers. Then they would look down at her application, really look at the name. Sienna Hart, a flicker of recognition, a sudden coolness. "I'm sorry, Miss Hart, but the position has just been filled. We're looking for someone with a different kind of experience. We'll keep your resume on file." The viral video. Chase Devereaux's humiliation had given her a digital scarlet letter. She was baggage. She was trouble. She was the girl who had angered a senator's son and, by extension, the powerful orbit he controlled. After her 9th rejection in 2 weeks, she was sitting on a park bench, her last few dollars spent on a stale coffee. The men Luke had assigned to her were still there, parked in a black sedan 100 yards away. They were a constant, silent reminder of the gilded cage she was now trapped in. She had no job, no family, and her only protector was the most feared man in the city, a man she hadn't seen since that night in his rose garden. Her phone buzzed. It was him. "You're in the West Park," Luke said. It wasn't a question. "I'm looking for a job," she said, her voice flat, tired. "And you have not found one." A pause. "They will not hire you, Sienna, not while Devereaux is still breathing." "So what am I supposed to do?" she snapped, the exhaustion making her reckless. "Am I just supposed to live off those tips you gave me until my savings run out in 3 weeks? Am I supposed to wait for you to bring me dinner again?" The line was silent for a beat. "No," he said, his voice level. "You are supposed to come work for me. As what? A waitress in another one of your clubs? As an events coordinator at Casa Bianco. It is my primary holding company. It is legitimate, and it is public." Her pride, the last jagged piece of her independence, reared up. I can't be on your payroll. Luke, I don't want a handout." "Casa Bianco is hosting the annual Kings Bay Foundation Gala in 6 weeks, he said, ignoring her protest. "My current coordinator has just gone on an unexpected, extended leave. The position is open, the work is real, the salary is $60,000 a year. It is not a handout. Sienna, it is a vacancy. I'm offering you an interview." She knew it was a performance, a way to soothe her pride. But he was also offering her a lifeline, and she was drowning. "One condition," she said, her voice trembling. "If I'm not good enough, if I can't do the work, you fire me. No questions, no protection. I earn it or I'm out." Another pause. This one longer. She could almost hear him weighing her words. "Agreed. My car will be at your apartment in 1 hour. Be ready." Casa Bianco was nothing like Cielo Rosso. It was a sleek, modern tower of glass and white marble downtown. The offices were bright, airy, and filled with the quiet, efficient hum of actual business. People in sharp suits nodded to her, their eyes curious but professional. Her transformation was immediate because it had to be. The job was real, and it was overwhelming. She was coordinating with vendors, reviewing catering contracts, and designing floor plans for a gala of 500 of the city's most elite. The meek, apologetic girl who had spilled champagne was buried under invoices and seating charts. Sienna found a new voice. It was clear, firm, and polite, but it was not apologetic. She learned to negotiate, to delegate, and to look men in suits directly in the eye and say, "No, that is not acceptable." Luke gave her a corporate card. Her first purchase was a new wardrobe. She bought 3 pencil skirts, 4 silk blouses, and 2 pairs of sharp, sensible heels. She wore her hair in a tight, professional knot. When she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw the mouse. She saw a woman who belonged. Luke remained distant, but he was always watching. He reviewed her progress reports, his signature a sharp black line at the bottom. He never complimented her, but he never corrected her, either. His silence was its own form of approval. One evening, she was working late, staring at a vendor list, her shoulders aching with tension. You hold your stress in your shoulders. She jumped, spinning in her chair. Luke was leaning in the doorway of her new office, watching her. You scared me, she breathed. You need an outlet, he said, walking in. The work is demanding. You're internalizing the pressure. It will make you weak. I'm not weak, she said, bristling. Your mind is strong, he corrected, stopping in front of her desk. Your body is not. You need to learn how to fight back. Fight who? The florists. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. My trainer, Leo, has an open slot. Tomorrow, 6 a.m. in the gym downstairs. The next morning, she was in the gym. Leo was a mountain of quiet muscle who had her sweating in 5 minutes. He taught her how to stand, how to balance her weight, how to throw a punch. She took to it with a ferocity that surprised even herself. Every punch she threw at the heavy bag was a punch at Derek, at Chase, at her sister, at every person who had ever made her feel small. She was channeling her rage, her fear, and her grief, and turning it into power. She worked out every morning before work, the physical exhaustion clearing her mind, the new strength in her arms and legs seeping into her very posture. 6 weeks flew by. The night of the Kingsbay Foundation Gala arrived. Casabianco's grand ballroom was flawless. White orchids dripped from the ceiling. The orchestra played, and the wealthiest people in Kingsbay mingled, drank, and donated millions to the city's charities. Sienna, in a simple, elegant black gown, moved through the event with an earpiece, a clipboard, and an air of absolute authority. She was in her element. Luke watched her from the mezzanine. He saw her handle a crisis with the catering, charm a difficult donor, and direct her staff with a firm, quiet confidence. This was not the girl from the Rose Garden. This was someone new. At 2 a.m., the last guest had left. The staff was cleaning up. Sienna was in her office. Her heels kicked off under the desk, rubbing her temples. It was a success. She looked up. Luke was there, a glass of champagne in each hand. He was in a black tuxedo, looking impossibly sharp. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice hoarse. "Sir." He raised an eyebrow, walking over. "I believe we are past that." He set one of the glasses on her desk. "You earned this." She took the glass, her fingers brushing his. The simple contact was electric, a jolt of awareness that cut through her exhaustion. It was a good night. We raised over $3 million for the Children's Fund. "You did," he said. He didn't sit, just leaned against her desk, close, too close. The professional barrier she had built for 6 weeks suddenly felt paper thin. "You are formidable, Sienna Hart." She looked up at him, and the air crackled. The memory of his kiss, that soft, questioning touch, was suddenly, vividly present. "I had a good boss," she whispered. "No," he said, his voice low. "You had a good reason. You were fighting for your life." He took the glass from her unresisting hand and set it down next to his. He looked at her, his dark eyes intense, searching. "The job is yours, permanently. You earned it." And then, as slowly as he had in the garden, he leaned in. This time, there was no hesitation. She met him halfway. The second kiss was nothing like the first. It was not slow, not uncertain. It was a collision. It was deep and hungry and desperate. It was 6 weeks of tension, of unspoken awareness, of her newfound strength crashing against his unbending control. His hand cupped the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in the professional knot, pulling it loose. Her hair tumbled down. Her hands came up, not to his shirt, but to his face. Her palms framing his jaw, holding him as tightly as he held her. It was a kiss of equals, a raw, desperate claiming. He broke the kiss, his breathing ragged, his forehead pressed to hers. "My penthouse," he said, his voice a gravelly command. "It's upstairs." She didn't speak. She just nodded. He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers, and led her out of the office, through the empty ballroom, and into his private elevator. The ride was silent, the air thick and humming. The doors opened directly into a sprawling apartment that took up the entire top floor. It was all glass, steel, and shadow. The city lights a glittering tapestry far below. He didn't turn on the lights. He just turned to her, the city's glow illuminating their silhouettes. He was patient, yet his intensity was a tangible force. He didn't rush. He watched her, his eyes tracing every line of her face as he slowly, deliberately, unzipped the back of her gown, the silk pooled at her feet, leaving her in her simple slip. She trembled. Not from cold, but from a vulnerability she had not felt in weeks. "Luke," she whispered, a plea and a question. "I see you. Sienna," he murmured, his hands coming up to cup her face. "You are not small. You are not invisible." He kissed her again, deeply, backing her toward the bedroom. The intimacy that followed was a revelation. It was not the clumsy, selfish fumbling she had known in her past. It was a careful, deliberate exploration. Luke was intense, his control absolute, but it was a control focused entirely on her. His movements were slow, measured. His gaze locked on her face, watching every flicker of her expression, every hitch in her breath. His touch was respectful, almost reverent, as his hands learned the new, strong lines of her body. He held her close, his strength a comforting, solid wall around her. For Sienna, it was a surrender, not to him, but to herself. She allowed herself to be seen, to be touched, to be wanted. Her fear dissolved, replaced by a rising, bold desire. Her actions became confident, her eyes searching his, a silent, mutual conversation that was as emotional as it was physical. It was sensual, powerful, and deeply, profoundly intimate. Afterward, they lay in the tangle of high thread count sheets, the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling. The silence was comfortable, sated. Luke was propped on an elbow, his free hand idly tracing circles on the bare skin of her back. She had never felt so safe. She had never felt so chosen. She turned her head on the pillow to look at him. His face, in the dim light, was softer. "Why me?" she whispered, the question that had haunted her since the night he'd left $500 on the bar. "Of all the people, why did you even look at me?" He stopped tracing circles. He looked down at her, his dark eyes holding an unsettling honesty. "Because," he said, his voice a low rumble, "you never expected someone to choose you. Everyone else in this city wants something. They demand to be seen. You just wanted to survive. That makes you honest." He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "That makes you real." She closed her eyes, letting that sink in. Across town, in the industrial district, a different kind of fire was burning. A 3-alarm blaze lit up the night sky, consuming a block-long warehouse. Firefighters battled the chemical-fueled flames, but it was a total loss. Luke's phone, on the nightstand, vibrated. He glanced at the text, his expression hardening instantly, the softness vanishing. "Warehouse 7 arson, Vellucci markers found." He slid out of bed, careful not to wake her. He walked to the glass wall, looking out at the distant smoke plume, his back to the woman sleeping in his bed. He dialed his advisor. "Report. It's gone," his man said. "The Velluccis made their move. They used the senator's distraction. Total loss on the dry goods. No one was inside." Luke stated, "No, sir, we cleared it. Like you said, but they're sending a message." "And I will send one back," Luke said, his voice pure ice. He ended the call. Sienna stirred. "Luke," he turned, his face carefully composed, the cold anger locked away. "I'm here." He walked back to the bed. She looked at him, sensing a shift. "Is something wrong?" "No," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed, his back to her. "A small problem with a shipment. Nothing." He was already compartmentalizing, building the wall that kept his world separate from hers. He was protecting her. "Oh, okay." She believed him. She had no reason not to. The next day, she overheard it. She was in the Casa Bianco lobby, heading to a meeting, when she passed Luke's personal office. The door was ajar. His voice was sharp, cutting. "Not enough. I want eyes on Rico Vellucci. I want to know what he eats for breakfast. The warehouse was a message. Our reply needs to be a headline. They used fire? We will use concrete." Sienna froze. Warehouse? Vellucci? She remembered the names from the whispers at Cielo Rosso, a rival gang. She pushed the door open. Luke was on the phone, his back to her. He spun around, his face a mask of cold fury at the interruption. The look softened, but only barely, when he saw it was her. "I have to go," he said into the phone and hung up. "Sienna, I'm in a meeting." "What warehouse?" she asked, her new confidence holding her steady. "What happened?" "It is business," he said, his voice flat, dismissing her. "It does not concern you." "Does not concern me?" she repeated, a spark of anger igniting. "You're talking about rivals and retaliation. You put your men on me 24/7 because of Chase. This concerns me." He walked toward her, his protective nature rising like a storm. "What I do to keep this family and you safe is my concern, not yours. I handle it. You are safe here. That is all you need to know." It was the worst possible thing he could have said. He was treating her like the girl from the club, like something fragile that needed to be kept in the dark, shielded from the ugly realities. He was making her small again. "No," she said, her voice shaking, but not with fear, with rage. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to let me into your bed and then shut me out of your life. I am not some doll you keep on a shelf. Luke, I am not my mother." "Sienna," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. "I saw that smoke last night. Everyone did. That was you, wasn't it? That was your warehouse. You lied to me." "I kept you safe." He bit back, his control snapping. "I'm protecting you from a world you cannot possibly understand. The Velluccis are not drunken college boys. They are animals, and I will not have you involved." "By lying to me? By making decisions for me?" she cried. "You said you chose me because I was real. Well, this is real, Luke. This is the world you live in. And if I'm in it, I deserve to know the truth. I am not weak." "You are strong," he countered, grabbing her arms, his grip tight. "But you are not bulletproof, and I will not risk you." His protective side was a steel wall, and it clashed head-on with the iron strength she had just spent 6 weeks building. She looked at his hands on her arms, then back at his face. "Let go of me." He did, instantly, as if her skin had burned him. "I fought to get out of the shadows." "Luke," she said, her voice dropping to a cold, pained whisper. "I will not let you be the one who shoves me back in." She turned, her shoulders straight, and walked out of his office, leaving him standing alone in the sterile silence. The scent of smoke and her perfume warring in the air. The late afternoon sun was weak, casting long, thin shadows that stretched across the pavement as Sienna rounded the corner toward her building. She was carrying a thin paper bag holding a loaf of bread and a small carton of milk, mundane items that felt like an act of rebellion. She was trying, just for an afternoon, to pretend her life was her own. She saw the man Luke had stationed across the street, leaning against a dark sedan, trying to look bored. He saw her, gave a short nod, and pushed off the car. The sound was not what she expected. It was not the sharp crack of movies. It was a heavy, deafening pop, 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 like a string of industrial fireworks set off right next to her ear. Glass shattered from a storefront window nearby. The man, Dante, she remembered his name was Dante, shouted her name. "Sienna, down!" She froze, the paper bag slipping from her numb fingers. A black SUV, windows tinted so dark they looked solid, was moving slowly down the street. The sound came again, louder this time. Dante did not run to her. He ran at her. He tackled her low, driving his shoulder into her stomach, sending them both skidding across the rough sidewalk behind a concrete planter. The air left her lungs in a painful rush. She heard a wet thud and a sharp intake of breath from him. "Stay." "Down," he gasped, his body heavy on top of hers. The SUV sped up, tires squealing as it peeled around the corner. Silence rushed back in, heavy and thick, broken only by a distant car alarm and Sienna's own ragged breathing. "Dante?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He tried to push himself up, to check on her, but his arm buckled. She saw the dark stain spreading across the shoulder of his gray suit jacket. Another car, the sedan he'd been leaning on, screeched to a halt beside them. 2 more men, faces granite hard, piled out. "He's hit. Get her in the car. Now, go, go." Sienna was pulled to her feet. She looked back at Dante. his face pale, eyes squeezed shut in pain. Is he? He'll be fine. Move. She was shoved into the back of the sedan. The doors slammed, the engine roared, and they were moving before she could even register the bread and spilled milk on the sidewalk. The safe house was 20 minutes later, achieved through a series of turns that left her disoriented. It was a high-rise apartment, sterile and aggressively beige. It smelled of new paint and industrial cleaner. She was shaking. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving a cold, vibrating fury in its place. "Where is he?" she demanded of the man, Leo, who was now standing by the reinforced door. "The Don is on his way. Not him, Dante, the man who was shot. He's being handled. Separate location. You're secure here." Sienna paced the short length of the living room. Secure. She felt like a prisoner. "Why wasn't I warned? You knew this was a risk. You knew they were targeting this area, and you let me walk right into it? We were watching, Miss. We neutralized the threat." "He was shot," she snapped, her voice cracking. "That's not neutralizing. That's a failure. You used me as bait, didn't you? To see if they'd show up." Leo's face remained impassive, but his eyes were hard. "The Don will explain." "I'm tired," Sienna said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous tremor, "of men telling me what other men will explain." The door opened an hour later. It wasn't Leo this time. It was Luke. He looked nothing like the controlled Don she had seen in his study. His tie was gone, the top 2 buttons of his white shirt undone. His dark hair was a mess, as if he'd been raking his hands through it repeatedly. But it was his eyes that stopped her. They were wild, dark with a mix of fury and something that looked terrifyingly close to panic. He didn't speak. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his gaze locked on her, cataloging every inch of her, searching for injury. He stopped just short of her, his hands coming up to cradle her face. His palms were rough, his fingers tight, not gentle, but anchoring. "You're okay," he breathed. It wasn't a question. It was a command. "Dante is alive." Luke cut her off, his voice hoarse. "In surgery, he'll live, but you—" His thumb swept across her cheekbones, his eyes still frantic. I told you not to leave the main house. You told me I wasn't a prisoner." She shot back, the anger returning, pushing past the shock of his appearance. "You can't keep me in a gilded cage and call it protection. Luke, they were right there. They shot one of your men trying to get to me. You didn't warn me." "Warn you?" His grip tightened, his frustration exploding. "Warn you of what, Sienna? That the air is dangerous? That the Velluccis want you dead? I can't protect you if you won't stay near me. I cannot keep you safe if you are halfway across the city buying milk." The desperation in his voice stunned her. This was not the cold strategist. This was the man. "I can't live like that," she whispered, her own fury crumbling. The tremor was back in her hands. "I can't. You can't live at all if they get to you." He pulled her closer, his forehead pressing against hers. He closed his eyes, and she felt the tremor that ran through his entire body. "When I got the call," he said, his voice dropping. "When Leo said, 'Shots fired, your location,' I thought—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. That was what broke her. Not the gunfire, not the fear. It was the raw, unshielded terror in him. "I was so scared," she confessed, the words tearing out of her. Her hands came up to grip his wrists, clinging to the hands that held her face. "I know, I've got you. They won't get near you again." "No," she said, pulling back just enough to meet his gaze. "You don't understand. I was scared, but not of them." She took a shaky breath. "I'm terrified of this. Of needing you to be okay. Of watching Dante get shot and realizing my only thought was that he was one of yours. I am terrified of needing anyone this much." His expression softened. The fury drained away, replaced by a profound, aching understanding. He saw her, truly saw her, not as a prize or a victim, but as someone who had built walls so high she was suffocating behind them. "Sienna," he said, his voice rough. "Don't," she pleaded. "Don't say it's okay. It's not. I wasn't going to," he said. He slowly relaxed his grip, sliding his hands from her face down to her shoulders. It's the most terrifying thing in the world. Needing someone. It's a liability. It's a weakness. Then you understand, she said, relieved. No, he said, pulling her gently against his chest. It's a weakness I am no longer willing to live without. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly, and she let herself fall. For the first time, she didn't fight the embrace. She buried her face in the fabric of his shirt, inhaling the scent of him, soap, starch, and the faint metallic tang of adrenaline. They stood there for a long time, two survivors in the eye of a storm, their reconciliation raw and silent and complete. That night, the sterile apartment felt charged, the air thick with unspoken words and the lingering echo of the day's violence. They ate a simple meal Leo had arranged, a silent acknowledgement of the need for normalcy. Luke never moved far from her. He took calls in the other room, his voice a low, angry rumble, but the door always remained open. When she finally moved toward the bedroom, he simply watched her, his expression unreadable. She showered, the hot water washing away the grime of the sidewalk but not the chill in her bones. When she emerged, wrapped in a too large robe, he was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. He had shed his jacket. His shirt sleeves rolled up his forearms. He turned as she entered. "You should sleep," he said, his voice quiet. "I'll take the couch." Sienna walked toward him. She stopped a foot away. The fear was gone, replaced by a different kind of certainty. She'd been running from this, from him, from the complicated, dangerous knot he tied in her stomach. The drive-by had burned all that resistance away. Life was too short to be afraid of the wrong things. She raised her hand, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. He was freshly shaven, but she could feel the faint roughness beneath the skin. He went perfectly still, his eyes fixed on hers. "You're wrong," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm terrified of needing you, but I think I'm more terrified of what happens if I walk away." Her actions were bold, her gaze direct, searching his. She was not asking for comfort, she was asking for him. She leaned in, rising on her toes, and pressed her mouth to his. It was not the desperate, frantic kiss of the study. This was slow, deliberate. It was a question and an answer all in one. For a moment, Luke remained rigid, his control absolute. She felt the conflict in him, the tension in his shoulders. Then, with a low groan that seemed torn from his soul, he surrendered. His hands found her waist, pulling her flush against him. The robe gaped, and his hands were warm against her bare skin. He deepened the kiss, his mouth moving over hers with a possessive hunger that was banked by a surprising tenderness. He didn't take. He invited. He didn't conquer, he worshipped. This was not the Dawn. This was Luke. Sienna's hands moved from his jaw to his hair, her fingers tangling in the thick, dark strands. She kissed him back with all the pent-up frustration, fear, and desperate, white-hot need that had been building for weeks. She was the one who guided them backward, one slow step at a time, until the backs of her knees hit the edge of the bed. Luke broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers, his breathing heavy and uneven. "Sienna," he whispered, his voice thick. "Are you sure? I've never been less sure of anything in my life," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "And I've never wanted anything more." His restraint was a tangible thing. He looked at her, his dark eyes tracing the line of her collarbone, the curve of her mouth. He was giving her every chance to retreat. She answered by unwrapping her arms from his neck and, with deliberate slowness, pushing the robe from her shoulders. It pooled at her waist, his gaze darkened, appreciative and reverent. He moved with agonizing care. He lifted her, laying her back against the pillows, his body covering hers without crushing her. His lips found the pulse point in her throat, tracing a line of fire down her collarbone. Every touch was tender. Every kiss was a promise. This was not a claiming, it was an unwrapping. He unwound the tension from her body, replacing the memory of violence with the certainty of his touch. He cherished her, his movements fluid and restrained until she was arching against him, her body demanding more than tenderness. Her boldness returned, her hands exploring the hard planes of his back, her nails lightly grazing his skin. When he finally moved, settling between her legs, he looked down at her. The shadows in the room framed his face, but his eyes were clear. He was completely, devastatingly present. "You are mine, Sienna," he rasped, the words a vow, a brand, and as he joined their bodies, she didn't feel like a possession. She felt found. The peace of the safe house lasted less than 48 hours. The world outside, the one Luke commanded, did not stop. Sienna was drinking coffee, dressed in clothes one of Luke's people had delivered, when his phone buzzed. He had been quiet all morning, thoughtful, his hand never far from hers. He looked at the screen, and the tenderness of the last 2 days vanished, replaced by the icy calm of the dawn. He listened for a full 30 seconds, his only response a quiet, "How many?" He closed his eyes. "Civilians?" A pause. Understood. He hung up and looked at her. The Velluccis. What did they do? They placed a car bomb outside our import-export office, the one downtown. It detonated at 9:15 a.m. Your office. My legal front, he clarified, his voice flat. It was a message, but they were sloppy, or they didn't care. The blast hit a city bus that was passing. Sienna's stomach turned to ice. "Civilians. 14 injured," he said. "Too critical. All civilians. None of my men were even scratched. The bomb was on a timer. They wanted this. They wanted chaos. They wanted the police. And the police came." The attack put Luke's name and his known rivalry with the Velluccis on the front page. The press, the mayor, the commissioner, they were all screaming for arrests. The war was no longer in the shadows. It was on the 6 o'clock news. The pressure changed him. The tenderness was still there, but it was buried under a new layer of cold resolve. He was on the phone constantly, his voice clipped, giving orders she couldn't decipher. The second call came later that day. It was Leo, handing the phone to Luke. "It's Chase." Sienna froze. Luke took the phone. "What?" She couldn't hear Chase's voice, but she could imagine the reedy, terrified tone. "That was your choice," Luke said into the phone. "You picked your side." Another frantic burst of sound from the other end. "They used you," Luke said, his voice devoid of pity. "You were a pawn, and they moved you. Now they're done. That isn't my problem." He listened for another moment. "Protection? You're a liability. Chase, you're a loose end they will tie up. And you expect me to stop them? After you put a target on her?" Luke hung up the phone without another word. He looked at Sienna. "He's terrified," Sienna said, though she felt no pity for the man. "He should be," Luke said. "The Velluccis found out he was trying to play both sides. They humiliated him, took his money, and now they'll kill him to ensure his silence. He's asking for my protection. And you said no." "I protect what is mine," Luke said, his gaze unwavering. "He is nothing." The casual, cold dismissal of a human life, even one as pathetic as Chase's, settled between them. The apartment, once a refuge, now felt like the command center of a war she was complicit in. That evening, she stood before him. The intimacy of the night before felt a lifetime away. "Civilians were hurt today. Luke," she said, her voice quiet but strong. "A man is going to be murdered, and you're going to let it happen. It's the world I live in, Sienna." "But it's not the one I live in," she argued. "Or it wasn't. I don't know what this is. I thought I just had to survive you. Then I thought I had to survive the Velluccis. But this is different. This is a darkness that poisons everything, the bus, the bystanders." He faced her fully. He did not look away, did not offer platitudes. "I told you from the beginning what I am." "You told me," she agreed. "But I didn't understand. I'm not afraid of the violence. Not really. I'm afraid of this, the coldness, the acceptance that 14 people go to the hospital so you can win a war. I did not hurt them. The Velluccis did. But your existence caused it, this rivalry, this thing you all do." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Can you promise me this ever stops? Can you promise me a life where I'm not waiting for the next car bomb? Can you promise me peace?" His silence was her answer. Luke stepped toward her, taking her hands. They were cold. He held them, warming them in his own. "No," he said. his voice raw with honesty. I can't promise you peace. I can't promise you a quiet life. The world I inhabit will always have shadows. It will always have blood. She started to pull away, but he held her fast. But I can promise you this, he said, his gaze intense, drilling into hers. I will never lie to you. I will never treat you as a pawn. I will give you respect. I will give you a choice. And I will give you the power to face those shadows with me, instead of running from them. He released one of her hands and gestured to the door. If you want to leave, I will find a way. I will send you somewhere they will never find you. A new name, a new life, safe and peaceful. The offer hung in the air. It was everything she thought she wanted. An escape, anonymity, peace. Sienna looked at the door. She thought of the bland, beige apartment, the life of hiding, of always looking over her shoulder, of being alone. She thought of the fear she felt, but also the fire she felt when she was with him. The world he offered was brutal, but it was real. She then looked at him, at the man who offered her a choice, not a cage, the man who saw her strength, not her weakness. Running isn't a choice, she said, her voice finding a new, hard edge. It's just a different kind of prison. A slow, dangerous smile touched Luke's lips. Then what is your choice, Sienna? She stepped back into his space, her hand coming up to rest on his chest, right over his heart. She felt the steady, strong beat beneath her palm. I am done surviving, she said. I am done being bait. If they're going to hunt me, they're going to find out I hunt back. She held his gaze, her own reflecting the steel she saw in his. I'm staying, not to hide, not to be protected. She paused, letting the weight of her decision settle. I'm staying to fight. Sienna did not just stay. She began to build. The quiet, sterile beige of the safe house was replaced by the deep mahogany and rich gold of Luke's study, which had become her unofficial headquarters. She was not a fighter in the way his men were. She did not understand logistics or weapons, but she understood perception. She understood influence. A charity gala, she announced one Tuesday, 2 weeks after the truce. Luke looked up from a ledger, his expression skeptical. We don't do galas. We don't invite the public into our home. No, Sienna corrected, tapping a pristine proposal on his desk. Casa Bianco doesn't, but the Bianco Community Fund does. We're hosting it at the City Museum. We're raising money for the downtown children's wing, the one damaged in the... She faltered. The one damaged by the Vellucci bomb, he finished, his voice flat. Exactly. They created the wound. We heal it. We're not laundering money, Luke. We're laundering goodwill. She leaned forward, her passion evident. Your men are fighting a war in the dark. I'm going to fight one in the light. They'll never see it coming. He stared at her, the spark of his partner in the safe house now a burning fire. He nodded. Once. Do it. The first gala was a staggering success. Sienna, in an emerald green gown, moved through the crowd of city council members, old money philanthropists, and skeptical journalists with an effortless grace. She was not the Dawn's sequestered woman. She was the director of the fund. She gave a speech, her voice clear and steady, never mentioning the mafia, only senseless violence and community restoration. Luke watched from the mezzanine, a shadow in a tuxedo. He watched as the mayor shook her hand. He watched as a notoriously cynical columnist from the city's biggest paper laughed at something she said. The press, which had been baying for his blood for weeks, changed its tune. The headlines shifted. Bianco's new face. One read, From crime lord to community pillar? Asked another. Luke's image was improving, and Sienna was the reason, behind the scenes. The tension was a different animal. His capos, men forged in the old ways, did not like it. She's putting a face on us, Dawn, Leo said, his tone respectful but strained. During a late-night meeting, a face is a target. She's putting a shield on us, Leo, Luke countered, his voice quiet. The police are backing off. The politicians are taking our calls. She has done in 6 weeks what you haven't been able to do in 6 years. She is to be respected. Understood? Leo nodded, but the unease remained. Sienna was light, and they were creatures of the dark. They feared she would either expose them or, worse, make them soft. The Velluccis, humiliated by the truce and cornered by Luke's newfound public support, were bleeding. They saw Sienna not as a shield, but as the one crack in Luke's armor, and they aimed for her. They didn't come for her directly. They came for the one thing left in her life that Luke hadn't touched. Sienna was reviewing vendor contracts for a second event when her personal cell phone rang. It was Tasha. She hadn't spoken to her in weeks. Afraid to draw her friend into this world, she smiled, relieved, and answered, "Tash. Oh my God, I'm so sorry I've been—" "She can't talk right now, Sienna." The voice was unfamiliar, oily, smug. Sienna's blood ran cold, the proposal slipping from her fingers. Who is this? Where is Tasha? She's fine, for now. A little scared. She didn't know her best friend was Mafia royalty. The man chuckled. This is how it works. We have her. You'll tell your new boyfriend he's going to cede the Docklands, all of them. He has 24 hours to make the call, or Tasha pays for his mistake. The line went dead. Sienna was still standing, phone in hand, when Luke walked in. He took one look at her face, the blood drained from it, the sheer animal terror in her eyes, and he was across the room. What is it? Who called? They have Tasha, she whispered, the words barely audible. They took Tasha. Oh God, Luke, they want the Docklands. The tenderness in his eyes vanished, replaced by an arctic cold fury that was more terrifying than any shouting. He took the phone from her shaking hand. Leo, he barked into his own phone, get me Marco Vellucci, now. While he waited, he put his hands on her shoulders. Sienna, look at me. She looked up, her eyes blind with panic. This is my fault. I left her. I didn't warn her. This is not your fault. This is theirs, and they will pay for it. His phone buzzed. He put it on speaker. Marco. Don Bianco. Marco Vellucci's voice was laced with false confidence. Pleasure to do business. You targeted a civilian, a non-participant. You broke the truce. I took insurance, Marco sneered. And you, Don, are going to pay the premium, the docks, by midnight tomorrow. Luke was silent for a moment. And if I don't, then your woman's friend learns, piece by piece, just how serious we are. You made this public. Luke, let's see how the press likes this. Luke hung up. Sienna grabbed the front of his shirt. Luke, please, don't just retaliate. You can't go in blind. She's all I have left of my old life. You can't just start a war. Please. He covered her hands with his own, his expression grim. I made a vow. Sienna, I told you what would happen if they hurt you. And by taking her, they have hurt you. Then let me fix it, she pleaded, her mind racing, the panic giving way to the cold calculation she had learned from him. Don't be a soldier. Be a strategist. They think they found my weakness. Let's use it against them. He watched her, intrigued. Go on. They want the docks, but they know you won't just give them. This isn't about territory. It's about humiliation. They want to prove you're weak. They want to prove I make you weak. They're wrong, he growled. I know. So let's show them. The foundation dinner is tomorrow night. The mayor will be there. The police commissioner. The press. They'll expect me to be in hiding. They'll expect you to be tearing the city apart. And instead, she said, her voice dropping, we show up. We go to the gala. We smile for the cameras. We show them they haven't touched us. Luke's eyes narrowed. It's bait. You're a target. I'm the bait, she confirmed. They'll have to make a move. They'll have men there, watching. They'll try to get to me, or they'll pass a message. And when they do, your men will be waiting. It's too dangerous. They know you're the target. They think I'm a soft target. They're expecting a terrified civilian, not the Don's partner. They won't be expecting a trap. He studied her, seeing the resolve, the steel that now matched his own. They'll have Tasha nearby, he murmured, his mind already working. They'll need her close to make the exchange or to dispose of her if it goes wrong. So you find her, Sienna urged, while I have every eye in that ballroom fixed on me. He nodded slowly. They won't get within 10 feet of you. The night of the gala was electric. The air in the Grand Hotel ballroom was thick with perfume, string music, and the low hum of polite conversation, but beneath it, for Sienna, the world was a high-strung wire. She wore a crimson dress. It was a declaration. It was floor-length, severe in its elegance, and cut to reveal the strong line of her back. Her hair was swept up, and the necklace Luke had given her, a cascade of sapphires, rested against her collarbone. She was not hiding. She was daring them. Luke's hand never left the small of her back. He was immaculate in a black tuxedo. His presence a palpable force field. He smiled at politicians, his eyes cold. He nodded to donors. His gaze sweeping the exits, every waiter, every busboy. Every security guard in the room was either one of his or had been vetted by Leo. "They're here," Luke murmured, his lips close to her ear, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly on her waist. 2 men. By the north entrance, and one posing as a waiter. Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept the smile fixed on her face. And Tasha? Leo's team has located the vehicle, a black van in the subterranean garage. 3 men inside. One of them is holding her. They're waiting for Marco's signal. Marco Vellucci wasn't there, of course. He was somewhere safe, waiting. The signal was meant to be the waiter. He approached their table, holding a silver tray with a bottle of champagne. He was nervous, sweating slightly. "A gift," he said, his voice too loud. "From Mr. Vellucci." It was the code. It was the signal that he had access to her. "Thank you," Sienna said, her voice perfectly calm. "But we won't be drinking tonight." The waiter's eyes darted to his backup by the door. That was the mistake. The ambush was silent. It was not a firefight. It was a removal. As the waiter turned, 2 of Luke's men, dressed as guests, boxed him in. One hand on his shoulder, another in his back. A quiet word. He was escorted out a side door before anyone even noticed. The 2 men by the entrance simply vanished, pulled into an adjoining corridor by more of Luke's team. It was over in less than 30 seconds. Luke leaned in. Leo's moving. Down in the garage, the quiet was broken. Leo's team disabled the 3 guards in the van with brutal, silent efficiency. Luke guided Sienna from the table. "Walk with me." They moved not toward the main exit, but toward the service corridor. "The garage is secure," Luke said into a discreet microphone on his cuff. They emerged into the concrete chill of the parking garage just as Leo pulled a shaken, weeping Tasha from the van. Her hands were bound with zip ties. "Sienna!" Tasha cried out, stumbling. Sienna rushed forward, catching her. "Tasha, it's okay. You're safe. I've got you." She turned to one of Luke's men. "Cut these off her. Get her in my car. Now." She pulled Tasha into a desperate hug, shielding her from the sight of the unconscious guards. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was so scared." Tasha sobbed into her shoulder. "I know. It's over. You're safe." Luke watched them for a moment, his face hard. He turned to Leo. "Where is Marco?" "He's at the Vellucci restaurant, downtown, waiting for the call that never came." "Good," Luke said. "He'll be expecting me." He left Sienna with Tasha, surrounding them with 4 guards. "Take her home. Lock it down. No one in or out." Sienna met his gaze over Tasha's head. She just nodded. "Go." The confrontation was not a war. It was an execution of power. Luke walked into the empty restaurant, flanked by Leo and 4 others. Marco Vellucci was at the bar, alone, a drink in his hand. When he saw Luke, his face went white. "You're a fool, Marco," Luke said, his voice quiet in the empty room. "You broke a truce. You involved a civilian. You lost your men. You lost your leverage. And now, you've lost your last chance." "It was just business, Bianco," Marco stammered, trying to regain his composure. "This," Luke said, "was a mistake, and my father taught me to clean up mistakes." Before Marco could reply, the doors of the restaurant opened again. This time, it was Marco's father, Don Vellucci, flanked by 2 of the old bosses from the Commission. They had been summoned by Luke. The old Don looked at his son with pure contempt. He then looked at Luke. "It is done. The truce. It was violated. By my house." "It was," Luke agreed. "There must be restitution." the old man said, his voice heavy. "The truce will be honored, but there is a stain." "There is," Luke said. "What do you demand?" Luke looked at Marco, who was visibly trembling. Luke could have demanded his life. He could have demanded his territory. Instead, he made a different calculation. "The war ends. Your son's mistake has cost you enough." "The truce holds," Luke declared. Don Vellucci looked relieved. "Thank you. You are merciful." "I am not," Luke said, his voice cold. "The truce holds under one condition. The problem that started all this, the liability who played both sides and brought this heat onto our families, the one who targeted Sienna in the first place." The old men understood instantly. A life for a life. Not Tasha's, who was innocent, but the one who had started the fire. "Chase," Don Vellucci said. "He's yours." Luke said, "By sunrise." The war was over, not with a bang, but with a bargain, sealed in the code of their world. Luke had won, not by destroying his enemy, but by controlling the board. And Sienna, now safe in the fortress of his home, had been the one to show him how. The sun had not yet risen when Leo interrupted their breakfast. "He's here. Don." The package was delivered by Vellucci's men, as promised. The package was being held in a wine cellar that had been converted into a holding room. It was cold, stone, and smelled of damp earth and old vinegar. When Sienna walked in, Luke a step behind her. She saw him. Chase was bound to a simple wooden chair. He was trembling, his eyes wide and bloodshot, his expensive suit rumpled and stained. He had been crying. When he saw her, a strangled sob escaped his throat. "Sienna, oh God, Sienna, please, I didn't mean it. They made me. They had my debts. They threatened me. You have to tell him, please." Luke remained by the door, a silent, imposing shadow. This was not his room. It was hers. Sienna said nothing. She walked to a small table and set down a laptop. She opened it, turned it to face him, and pressed play. The first clip was security footage from the club. It was grainy, time-stamped, but clear. It showed Chase at the bar, his back to the camera, looking over his shoulder before he tipped the small vial into her drink. It showed him smiling as he carried it over to her, his face a mask of false friendship. "You were smiling," Sienna said, her voice quiet, clinical. It was colder than the room. "No, I was scared," he whimpered. She clicked to the next file, footage from an ATM camera near her apartment. It showed her stumbling, disoriented, clutching her head. It showed her falling to her knees before she managed to get into her building. Was I scared, Chase? Or was I just weak? An easy target? She played the next file. It was a news report. A frantic journalist standing in front of the smoking wreckage of the bus. The headline blared, 14 injured in downtown bombing. "These people," Sienna said, "were just going to work. They were caught in a war you helped escalate because you wanted to clear a debt." Chase was openly weeping now, snot and tears running down his face. "I didn't know they would do that. I just gave them you." "You just gave them me," she repeated, the words hanging in the air. "And because you gave them me, they thought they could take my friend." She clicked the last file. It was from the garage. It showed Tasha, her face pale with terror, being pulled from the van. It showed her sobbing, her hands bound. "Her name is Tasha," Sienna said, finally looking him in the eye. Her own were dry. "She's a teacher. She has nothing to do with this. She's the only family I had, and you put her in that van." "I'm sorry," he howled, the sound pathetic. "I'm so sorry. I'll do anything, please, and don't let him kill me." Sienna closed the laptop. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by Chase's wretched sobs. She looked at the shell of a man, this creature who had valued his own comfort above her life, above Tasha's, above anyone's. She felt nothing. Not pity, not rage, just a vast, cold emptiness. Luke stepped forward, his polished shoes echoing on the stone. His presence seemed to suck the very air from the room. Chase went rigid with terror. "He's a liability," Luke said, his voice a low rumble. He was looking only at Sienna. "He is a loose end. He has proven he will sell anyone to save himself. He can never be trusted." He placed a hand on her shoulder, a simple gesture of ownership and power. Say the word, Sienna, just one word, and he disappears. He will cease to be a problem. No one will ever look for him. The air crackled. The offer was real, absolute, the power of life and death, handed to her in a single word. Chase's eyes were white with panic. He was vibrating, unable to speak, his life hanging on her answer. Sienna looked at Luke, at the dark promise in his eyes. Then she looked back at Chase. She saw him not as a monster, but as a coward. A weak, pathetic, selfish coward. And she knew what to do. "No," she said. Luke's eyebrows raised, just slightly. It was the only sign of his surprise. "No?" Chase whispered, hope dawning in his eyes. Sienna turned her full attention to him, and the hope died. Her expression was merciless. "No," she repeated. "Killing you is easy. It's fast. It makes you a victim. And it makes this entire thing about you. You don't deserve that." She took a step closer, forcing him to meet her gaze. "I want you to live. I want you to wake up every single morning for the next 50, 60 years, in whatever miserable, empty life you're about to be dropped into. And I want you to remember this room. I want you to remember that Sienna, the woman you drugged, the woman you sold, the woman you thought was nothing. I held your life in my hand, and I let you go." She turned away from him. "He isn't worth the bullet. He isn't worth the silence." She looked at Luke. "Let him live with the knowledge that I made that call. That's my revenge." Luke studied her for a long, heavy moment. The coldness in his expression was replaced by a profound, burning respect. He had offered her his world, violence, finality, and she had found a third way, a way that was colder and far more complete. He nodded. Once. Leo, who had been standing by the door, stepped in. Take him. Get him processed. New name. New life. Put him on a cargo ship to somewhere cold and far away. Give him enough for a week. After that, he's on his own. Yes. Dawn. Chase was sobbing in relief, but as Leo cut his bonds and hauled him to his feet, the reality of his sentence set in. He was alive, but his life was over. He was a ghost. As he was dragged out, he looked back at Sienna, his eyes a mixture of gratitude and absolute, soul-crushing terror. She did not watch him go. As the door shut, sealing Chase's fate, Luke turned to her. He did not speak, but he lifted a hand, his thumb gently tracing the line of her jaw. He was looking at her as if for the first time. She had not just accepted his power, she had defined her own. In the weeks that followed, the city exhaled, the Velluccis, publicly shamed and internally fractured, retreated. The truce held. The car bombs stopped. The fear that had gripped the streets simmered down to a low, cautious tension. No more blood was spilled. For now. Sienna's apartment, the one she had clung to as a last bastion of her old life, and was packed up. She moved into the Casabianco estate. She moved in fully, not as a guest, not as a protected ward, but as its mistress. The house had been a fortress, a museum of dark wood, cold marble, and heavy, oppressive silence. It was Luke's personality solidified, powerful, intimidating, and closed. Sienna began to change it. She didn't ask permission, she simply acted. The heavy velvet drapes in the grand parlor, which had been drawn for a decade, were pulled back. Sunlight, bright and uncompromising, flooded the room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. She replaced stiff, unused chairs with deep, comfortable sofas in rich, warm cream. She filled the cavernous, echoing halls with life. Vases of bright, fragrant lilies and deep red roses appeared on consoles. She had a piano tuned, and in the evenings, the sound of classical music, or sometimes soft jazz, drifted up the grand staircase. The staff, who had moved with the silent efficiency of shadows, were startled. They found themselves being asked their names, being thanked. She learned the head cook's name was Maria, and that she missed cooking dishes from her childhood in Sicily. Sienna asked her to make them. Luke watched all of this with a quiet, fascinated detachment that slowly melted into something else. He would come home from late, tense meetings, expecting the cold silence, and would instead be met with the smell of roasting garlic and the sound of a violin concerto. One night, he found her curled up on one of the new sofas in the parlor, fast asleep, a book fallen open on her chest. The fire was dying in the hearth, casting a warm glow on her face. He stood there for a full 5 minutes, just watching her. The dawn, the strategist, the killer, was momentarily eclipsed by the man. He walked over, picked up a cashmere throw from the back of the chair, and gently draped it over her. She stirred, murmuring something in her sleep, and settled deeper into the cushions. He found himself standing in the warm, quiet room and realized for the first time in his life, his fortress felt like a home. 3 months after Chase disappeared, they hosted a gala, not a fundraiser at a neutral location, but a grand ball at the Casa Bianco estate. The invitations were the most sought after in the city. This was not just a party, it was a coronation. The house was magnificent. It was alive, glowing with candlelight, filled with music and the sound of laughter. The dark wood gleamed, the marble shone. It was no longer a fortress, it was a palace. Sienna stood at the top of the stairs. Next to Luke, he was in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, the undisputed king of his domain. But she was his equal. She wore a gown of pure, shimmering white, her hair swept up, the sapphire necklace he had given her, the price for her life, blazing at her throat. She was not a prisoner. She was not a prize. She was the queen. They descended the stairs together, a unit. Every eye was on them. The mayor, the police commissioner, the city's wealthiest patrons, even the quiet, watching eyes of the other families. The cynical journalist from the city paper found her, a champagne flute in hand. "Miss Sienna," she said, her tone no longer skeptical, but respectful. "You have performed a miracle. Not just for the city, but for this house." Sienna smiled, a calm, genuine smile. Luke's hand was resting lightly on the small of her back. "I just opened the windows," Sienna said. "The house did the rest." "And Don Bianco?" the journalist pressed, glancing at him. "He seems changed," Luke answered, his voice smooth as velvet, but his eyes were on Sienna. "Sienna has a gift for restoration," he said, the words a private vow in a public room. "She sees the value in things that others have written off." He lifted her hand, not to kiss it, but to hold it, lacing his fingers through hers. They stood side by side, public, powerful, and perfectly poised. Hours later, the last guest had departed. The house was quiet again, but it was a warm, sated quiet. The air smelled of wisteria and old wine. Sienna stood on the grand balcony adjoining their bedroom. The silk of her robe was cool against her skin. Below, the city glittered, a carpet of lights under a sky just beginning to turn a pale, pearlescent gray. The sun was coming. She didn't hear him approach, but she felt his warmth before he ever touched her. His arm slid around her waist from behind, pulling her back against his solid, bare chest. He wore only his trousers, and his skin was warm against her back. He hooked his chin over her shoulder, his breath stirring her hair. They stood in silence, watching the day begin. "I used to work in a cubicle," she whispered, her voice soft. She pointed to a tall, nondescript gray building in the financial district. "Right there, 32nd floor. I used to serve them coffee. Men like Chase. Men from the banks, from the law firms. They laughed at me. They spilled drinks and expected me to clean them up. They looked right through me." Her voice was reflective, not sad. It was a statement of fact, a life ago. Luke's arms tightened, holding her fast. He turned his head, his lips brushing the skin of her temple. He pressed a long, slow, possessive kiss there. It was not a kiss of passion, but of promise, of fact. "They won't ever again," he said. His voice was a low, dark vow. It was not a comfort. It was a simple statement of the new order of the world. Sienna closed her eyes, leaning back into his strength, into his certainty. She felt the steady beat of his heart against her back. The camera pulled back, leaving the two of them as a single silhouette against the rising sun. The city was waking up, The truce held, a moment of quiet peace, earned and paid for, but the silence was loaded, heavy with the future. The promise and the power still stood. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We truly hope you enjoyed it. We would love to hear from you. So please drop a comment and let us know where in the world you are listening from. If you loved this, please consider subscribing to Mafia Romance Stories for more content just like this. And finally, please share your thoughts on the story in English. We read every single comment.